Welcome to After Effects. We're going to learn the very basics by creating 4 clean animations from start to finish, which covers the most common and fundamental techniques that will prove most useful to your After Effects journey. In After Effects, there are many different styles of animations, so I'm going to show you the ways that I think are best for those who are new to the software. Now, whoa! It's okay to feel overwhelmed going into this journey. It's the same feeling as learning a new language or facing a scary new challenge. But luckily, in only 60 minutes, I'm going to make you feel comfortable in the software. Now, this tutorial is a lesson extracted from my online program, 6-Figure Editor, but I'm releasing this tutorial on YouTube for an incredible kickstart to your After Effects journey and to teach you as much as possible with only 1 hour of your time. The rest of the program is available to check out at 6figureeditor.com. But for now, you can download today's project files for free below this video. So when you load up After Effects for the first time, this is what you're going to see. And as you can see that it's split into multiple different sections because each of the sections has its own uses, and I really want to get into all of the kind of sections before you get into building the animations and these beautiful kind of scenes, because it's really important that you get familiar with the software and know exactly why everything is the way it is. And I just want to say that, you know, at any point if you get too confused, if I'm going too quick for you, you know, pause it, you know, rewind and just kind of follow me along. You can also play this video in, you know, 0.75 times speed. But yeah, basically we're just going to get into each of the sections, and this is going to be raw. I'm not going to be cutting things down. I'm not going to be like, you know, trying to jazz up this to sound really, you know, clean. I'm just going to be honest with you and just, you know, from my experience, I've been editing over 10 years and using After Effects for pretty much that entire time. So I'm just going to kind of tell you from my opinion what everything is useful for. So if we're over in this section, as you can see, it says project. Now, when we're building an animation, when we're building a scene, you know, a piece of work that we're working on, we have it inside of a project, and you can save projects under any name and you can kind of turn them into a file. And a project is a place basically that localizes all of the things that you're working on. For example, for a specific project, for a specific piece of work. When I create YouTube videos myself, I'll have, you know, maybe even 10 to 20 different projects that I have, After Effects projects that have different animations inside them. Now, you can put all of them inside of one project and kind of just use the same project, but I like for organization purposes to save them as different ones. As I said at the start of the video, that you can download the, you know, the file, the project file, down below this video. Basically what you can do is you can just download that and upload it straight into After Effects, and you would have all of the things that I worked on, because that's how a project works. A project just hosts all the things that you worked on in a organized place. And as you can see over here, it says project, and you know, you can see all of these pieces of information. What you can do is you can double click here, and it will basically bring up whatever folder you know you have, and with all of the images and files that you have on your computer, which then you can import. So what you need to do is just double click in this section, and you can bring in something, you know, whatever you want to do. So I'm going to bring in this image right here. As you can see, it is here, but you can't see anything else change. This is because down here, this is the timeline of an animation. If you use different editing softwares, for example DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro or whatever, Final Cut, you know that you have a timeline, even on CapCut, for example. And it's a bit different on After Effects, and I'm going to be breaking down how it works. However, this is where the timeline is going to be. So over here where we have this image, this is just the project file. So basically this is where we can just host files inside. So this is not currently in our animation, it's not currently in our scene, it's kind of just, you know, in a list of files. So if we imported another image, they'll just kind of gain a big list, and you'll be able to scroll down and see a big list. This just means that we have access to any files that we want at any point whilst within After Effects and bring them into the timeline, okay? So what I'm going to do is just grab this image and I'm going to drag it into this section. And as you can see, now it basically has created a, put the image inside here, okay? Now, what we want to do is create a custom size for our animation, because this is not ideal, you know, because we just drag this image is going to create a scene that, like a composition, we call it, that is the same size as this, which is not ideal. I'm going to press Command Z on Mac just to go back and to undo that. What we can do is we can head up to the top bar on our computer, go to Composition, and then New Composition. At this point, we can basically create a custom size, a custom composition, and a composition is basically this scene that we're creating. If you have a video that is 4K, resolution on Premiere Pro, like, the video that you're creating on an editing software, or, a client needs a 4K, quality animation, or like a 1080p animation, you basically can come in here and customize it. So firstly, let's customize our composition name. I'm going to put it as first animation. You can do it to whatever. It just means that you'll have good organization by naming things properly. I know as, editors, we end up putting, like some random names and then everything becomes confused. So let's just take this leap and do this. Then we can change the width and height. And as you can see also the aspect ratio here. So if we type in, just right here, 1920 by 1080, we know that that is the 16:9 standard video size. So when you watch a YouTube video, usually they're 1080p. That's what it will say, which is 1920 by 1080p. And what you can also do is click this lock aspect ratio here. And when you do that, basically means if you upgrade the width, it also does the height in proportion to the 16:9 ratio. If you undo that, there you can basically control this freely, which would make a very random size. As you can see, this would be a really random sort of aspect ratio. But what I'm going to do is just go back to having 1080p by 1920 by 1080. Now, as you can see, this section where it says preset, if you do this for the first time, saying custom, this will allow you to basically create the perfect sort of composition. And at that point, if you have something that you want to reuse, for example, a nice 1080p composition or a 4K composition, you can go into here and create your own preset. So for example, I could put this as Tom's 1080p preset. And as you can see, then it's saved down here as that. Keep this as square pixels right here, this pixel aspect ratio. We don't need to get into this right now. The frame rate I'm going to keep at around 23.976 because the sort of film FPS frames per second is around 24 or this kind of like mark. I always just have it set to this. I feel like it has the best look. Now if we come down to start time code and duration, basically, if you need a certain duration of an animation, for example, if it's 30 seconds, then you can go in and change this to 30 seconds right here. And that just means that the entire timeline will be 30 seconds long. There is no, no worries in terms of setting this because you can go in and change it at any point anyway. Now, we have this, so let's press OK. As you can see, we have a black screen right here. You can actually use your sort of scroll to zoom in and out, and this is where your composition is. This is basically the playback of the composition. Now, if we drag in this image into the timeline section, everything is in proportion to that, the 1080p resolution that we created. Now, in the timeline section down below, as you can see, we have what says 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. This may look a little bit different to you, but what we can do is basically scroll the timeline if we want to get a finer look using this, which we can just drag along, and then you can have a basically more zoomed in view of the timeline, or we can go straight back to being the most zoomed out, which is the 30-second time frame, which is obviously what we created in the composition. You can additionally press these buttons, so if we click this, it'll basically do one zoom in at a time, and the same for the zoom outs too. Okay, now as you can see, this section is split into two. This is the timeline, so it actually shows exactly what's going to be happening by every frame in the entire sort of scene. Okay, over here you see the layer information. So this layer is directly linked to this. If we bring in another one, you'll be able to see that there's two now. Now over here you have the options to change some details about the layer, but we're going to be getting into that very soon. In terms of this timeline right here, how do we make a piece of footage basically shorter than others? How do we make it longer than others? What we can do is essentially go to the very end of this clip right here, because it's 30 seconds long. This image is going to be in a timeline, and we can basically get this end and drag it back to whatever duration we want. So for example, we could do it to around 5 seconds. Then we can maybe zoom in to get a better look. Okay, and this means that, after 5 seconds, if we play this back by pressing space, you'll be able to see that at 5 seconds, it disappears. Okay, and we can also move around this clip on our timeline by actually just clicking down and dragging this clip around. So if we want it to come in at 2 seconds, we can do that by dragging it to that mark. So if we go to the very start, press spacebar, you will see that after 2 seconds it comes in. And we can basically play around with this, with all of the layers and all of the pieces of, footage and resources that we bring into the project itself. Now what I want to do right now is basically create our first animation together with the very simple principles, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So first of all, I'm just going to press backspace on this layer to delete it and basically just have a fresh animation space. What we're going to do is create this animation that is on screen right now, and as you can see, there's lots of moving elements, and we're kind of getting into this moment where now we're going to be actually moving things around and making it work as, a natural fluent animation. And let me just tell you, this is going to be very simple, and this is going to involve shapes. So it means that we don't need to import anything into the software itself. Now, we have two methods of making shapes. We can either go here to where these layers are on the timeline and right-click, New, and then go to Shape Layer. However, there is no need to do that. What we can do instead is we can just go up to this right here. We can actually hold down and you'll be able to select, what kind of shape that you want. For us, of course, with this animation, we are just going to start with the rectangle tool because we want to create these side sort of paddles that are being hit against the ball. So if we just create this, we basically now have this on the cursor. You'll be able to see the sort of like shape, like overlay. So if we basically just go into the center, and we're just going to drag and let go like this, okay? And as you can see now, if we actually just change to have this, which is just the general selection tool, you'll be able to see that we now have a general shape layer inside of our composition. And we can freely move this around by doing this with the selection tool, or we can actually go to the shape layer one, and you can press P on your keyboard. And this, now you'll be able to have position like options, okay? So what you can do now is you can drag, and as you can see on different axes, this shape will now move on the composition. So you have the full control to move it around. Now, the reason I'm telling you to press P and press different shortcuts is because I want you to get used to shortcuts, because they're going to make your animation creating a lot more simple and a lot quicker than, than basically just going over manual things. For example, I could just press this drop down, I could go to transform and then go to position. However, all I needed to do was click on the layer, press P, and you already have access to position. Okay, so this is really useful. Now, how do we make this centered into the general, like into the middle of the screen? We can go to the side section and scroll down until we get to Align. Click on Align, and then we're going to press these Align Horizontally button and the Align Vertically button. And now you'll be able to see that that is in the dead center middle of the screen right here, okay, which is perfect. Now, how do we create the movements? Well, this is a thing where we need to introduce keyframes. So what are keyframes? Essentially, over time in your timeline, we can basically set a start point and an end point of a value. A value can be position, it could be rotation, it could be size. Basically any value that can be changed in some regard, and we really have as much freedom as we want with this. But as I said, it allows you to have a starting value and an ending value. So this could mean that, for example, we have a starting value of the shape being up here and an end value of the shape being down here. So how do we do this? If we just go to the start of our timeline right here, just drag this to the very beginning, what we can do is press this button right here, which is basically allowing you to now start creating keyframes. If we have this on, you'll be able to see that on the timeline this kind of dot has appeared, and that is an actual keyframe itself. We can change the value of this keyframe in any way we want. I'm going to change the value by actually making, the shape being up here, for example, okay? In fact, I'm going to bring it to this side section, like here, okay? Now, that basically just sets a value of this keyframe. And if we go to 5 seconds right here, so we just bring this over to here, and then we change the value to being all the way down here, you'll be able to see that line that appears in the composition view back. And what this allows you to do, if you go to the very start and play, you'll be able to see that there's now movement because you've set basically a difference in values between these two keyframes. So how can we make it go back to the top again? So it's doing the same thing as the animation. If we go to the 0 second sort of mark, we obviously that the value, this sort of vertical value is 310, okay? So if we go back over to, let's go to the 10-second mark, and then we're going to go into this value and put in 310. As you'll be able to see, it goes back up. So now if we play this back, you'll be able to see that it goes all the way down. This is going to take a moment, but then it bounces all the way back because it has 3 different values now on the sort of time, the time line. So right now we can make this go quicker by bringing the values closer to each other. So if I bring this really close to this one, you'll be able to see that it moves a lot quicker now. But there's a bigger space between this next keyframe, which means it's going to go a lot slower. And that's just generally how it works. So let's just create the second paddle and basically get this working. We're going to set some variables right here. So if we go to 0 seconds, I'm going to zoom in very quickly. We're going to have this value at 2 seconds. So it's like this. And then bring this next one to 4 seconds. So we have things very nicely even. I'm also going to create one at 6 seconds, 839, okay. So, 839, there we go. What I can do to make an exact replica of this shape is basically click it, and then go to Command D. Now you've made an exact duplicate, even with the different keyframes and the different values that have been set for it. Basically duplicating it. So if I press P on this layer too, you'll be able to see that also the keyframes are on this layer. Now, what I can do is essentially, obviously we want the panel to be on the other side. What I can do is, granted that you're on one of the keyframes, so you can see over here that, we're kind of sitting on one of the keyframes right now. If we just drag our cursor, so we click and drag, so all of them are highlighted. And then we're going to drag this across. As you can see, the entire sort of movement of it is also going to be aligned, like all of the keyframes are affected. So I can bring it to here. For example, if we go to the very start, we have to see that both of them are operating at different sides of the, composition, okay? So what I'm going to do to stagger this, so basically they're moving at different rates and, they're not actually just kind of moving in a parallel, way. These are all selected still. If I move them back slightly, so I'm going to move them back right here. Now if we start from the beginning, we have to see that now they're not working, together. And this is where we're going to be getting into sort of a multi-motion sort of level. I'm going to bring this over to the 2-second mark. So they are complete opposites now. Okay, so if we play this now, they are complete opposites. Okay. I'm going to go to the 0-second mark, and I'm going to actually set a value 839 on this one, which means that it's going to be starting from the very start anyway. So there we go. We can see that they're moving at complete opposites. Okay. Now, as you can see, after a while, that the motion stops. Okay, and basically we can continue to set these keyframes going, whatever, and we can keep doing this for forever. We can set it all the way to the 30-second timeline. However, there's a better way to do this. As you can see, there's a bar just above our timeline here, and you can see the 2 sort of blue endings. This is our working area, essentially. If we drag this right down, I'm going to drag this to around here. As you'll be able to see now, that this is the only thing that's going to be playing. If we kind of drag this right down even to the beginning section, you'll be able to see that it keeps looping when it hits that end blue mark, which is really important because, when we're working on a certain project and we kind of just want to keep a certain section looping, and just to work on a certain section, we can just have this working area selected, okay? For now, we're going to drag this out a little bit. Now, how do we create our ball? How do we create this ball that's going to be bouncing in the middle? Well, once again, we're going to go to the shape area, we're going to hold down, and we're going to go to ellipse tool, okay? And what we can do to create an ellipse, if we just actually drag, you'll be able to see that it creates a very free shape. It doesn't have any certain size to it, okay? But when we're creating the shape, if we hold shift, it basically creates it as a perfect like a circle. As the same if it was like a rectangle or a square, for example, it does it to exactly the same proportionate values. So I can keep moving this freely. As soon as I start holding shift, it makes it basically lock to doing a full shape. So we're going to do it to around this size. Let go. Once again, we're going to go to align, and we're going to align this in the middle. Now, just a quick rule which is going to help you to understand everything going forward. What is this dot right here? Well, this is an anchor point. This is essentially whatever layer that you have selected, there is an anchor point for each of the layers, okay? And for these two, I should have, actually told you about, getting this thing aligned, but it doesn't really make sense to do it for these rectangles. However, with this ball, I'm going to show you. So basically, what you can do is you can head over to this tool right here. I would actually do it, which is the anchor point, basically that matches with this. An anchor point is basically the starting point of a shape. It is the center of the shape. So if we rotate a shape or if we move it, it will go via that anchor point. Okay, so see it as the dead center of a shape or an object or whatever it might be. And you can use this to your advantage. For example, if you want it to a shape to rotate around a certain like point, for example, like a corner of a like rectangle, then basically you could set the anchor point to that bit and then it would start rotating around this anchor, okay? But we're going to basically set this to the dead center of the ellipse right here. And if it doesn't snap for you into the middle, what you can do is toggle this snapping thing right here. And basically, yeah, it will just snap straight into the middle, okay? And that's simply it. Now, we want to make this snap essentially between the two puddles right here, okay? I'm actually going to make this full screen. If you start zooming out and in, then it's like you can get a bit messy, but what you can do is just go to this drop down and press fit, and then it will just fit into this into the box nicely. So what we want to do is basically go and onto this, circle layer, press P once again for position. And I'm going to start this position you can actually drag this yourself, as I said before, with the selection tool. I'm going to turn off the snapping so it doesn't start snapping right here. And I'm going to basically bring it to hit the corner of the composition sort of view. And then the next part is going to hit this puddle. So what you're going to see now is this motion. Okay? Which works really well. Now we have this initial, animation that you've just been able to do out of thin air. And as you can see, we have this sort of working area. I'm going to extend this a little bit because I want the ball to continue. So now that the ball is hit from there, we need to think from a physics point of view, kind of the natural movement of animations. This is like the key to animation is to make things seem as realistic as possible, to have kind of like realistic movements of objects. For example, if you ever had a human that you're animating, you want them to have human characteristics. How do they move? How do they react to certain things, And it's the same with balls. For example, in this scenario, you need it to actually move properly, because if we then kind of, for the next keyframe, we went all the way down, this now just mitigates the whole realism, because that is not what a ball does, when it hits an object. So, where would it go? Of course, the ball would go sort of to here. Okay? Now, if we just bring this down, actually needs to be a little bit more like here, I think. Put a bit closer, because there's shorter distance between going to here and to here. As you can see, now this is realistic. So well done, you've made your first basic animation in After Effects. You have a basic understanding of the software and how things move and operate. And now we're going to move on to the second example, which, just makes things a little bit more advanced, and we're just going to progress nicely. So if we stop this video, we're going to go up to composition, drop down, and then click new composition. And we're going to create second animation. With the same preset, click OK. As you can see, now we have two different tabs. If we go over to first animation, we'll be able to go on to, what we've been working on in this one. And then we can go over to the second animation tab and basically create our own, separate animation within this one. So in this animation, we're going to be using a bit of text. So how do we create text? Well, the simple way is just to go up to this T icon up here and then going over to your composition and clicking. And as you'll see, if you be able to type in now, you'll see it appear. So we're going to just put animation right here. Press the selection tool just to get off this and go down to align. And we're going to align this in the centers again. Now, a cool way to just see exactly how things are positioned in your composition, there's a little trick here. So if you go down to this drop down, hold it, and then go to proportional grid and let go, you'll be able to see how things are proportioned in your animation itself. So you can see if things are symmetrical and nicely aligned in the middle. Okay, so this is a nice little way just to see how things are centered. I'm going to go off proportional grid, but basically back into the properties of this text layer. And you can basically change the text font here, and the weight of the text here, the size of the text here, and also the fill. So for example, you want to change the color of the text. You can do so here and just change it to anything that you possibly want and press OK. So for this animation, how did I create the cool pattern that goes across the pieces of text? As you can see, we can edit the color, but how do we have that pattern? Well, this is where we're going to be using a thing called matte. And the cool pattern is essentially footage, which I'm going to import now. So now that this has been imported, as you can see, if we actually double click on this, we opt to just view the footage itself. So it's this just cool pattern that moves alongside by itself. Now, I'm just going to press X on this and go back into the composition. I'm going to drag this into this timeline area. As you can see, now you can't see anything. You can't see the text in this sort of frame. This is because layers stack on top of each other. If I drag this below the animation layer, you'll be able to see, now you see the animation plus the pattern in the background, because things are stacked on top, from top to bottom. And just to show you what I mean is if we just drag in this image right here, as you can see, because it's in between, the background and the pieces of text is in between them here. So which means, anything that is further to the top in terms of this timeline is going to be literally at the top. Whatever is at the bottom of this list is literally at the bottom. It's the last layer, behind everything. So I'm just going to delete this right here. So how do we achieve putting this pattern on the text? Well, because this is way bigger, I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so it's just going to be the size of the text itself, so around there. And I'm going to press this thing where it says track matte. So track matte is the thing we're going to be using. If we basically click on the pattern layer and select the animation, so the text layer, as you'll be able to see, now the background has basically been inserted in the shape of that object. So the text, so when we matte something, we're basically taking whatever object it is and turning it into the same shape. So we're actually molding it to the shape of whatever other layer we select, if that makes sense. So I'm going to just move the position of this down a little bit. But as you can see, this is still quite dark. Even if we play it, it's still quite dark. So how do we make it brighter? This is where we can start using effects. So if we go over to this right section and click on effects and presets, I'm going to click it right here, we can go into search, and I'm going to type in brightness and contrast, which is here, okay? And what we can do is just drag an effect, whatever effect we choose, onto the layer that we want. And of course, we want it on the like the pattern layer, because that's what is being visible, So if we go to the brightness and we just start whacking this up to a higher brightness, as you can see, now we have a nice clear view because it's been made a lot brighter. So now if we play this from the start, as you can see, it looks really, really cool. However, I still think that this is a little bit too dull and it's not bright enough. What we can do is duplicate effects, because what we can basically see if we select on this layer is all the effects in this section. Okay, if we click on the animation, we have no effects that is present on this text layer. But I still want this brighter, so how can I do it? We can do the same thing we did as layers, which is duplicating. So if we select this effect, we go to Command D. As you can see, now we have a very bright layer. If I play this from the very start, as you can see, this looks absolutely beautiful. This is like Apple level stuff where it's just like you have a nice bit of text with, a background that's attached to the text. And this just looks so clean. Now, the one thing that I think we can add to this is the kind of sizing of it, because it feels a little bit too still. The size of the text isn't getting any bigger. And, for example, if we do make it bigger, as we, know the background size is only this big, right? So if we made the text size bigger, sure, it'd get bigger, but also would run out of the pattern because it was only a certain size, right? So what can we do in this situation? I'm going to go back to the original size it was. So what can we do to make it just gradually get bigger as the timeline goes along? Well, together. we can use a thing called pre-compositions and pre-composing things together. If we go, I'm going to click this layer, I'm also going to hold Shift, and then basically both of the layers are selected. We can then right click and then go to pre-compose. What this does is basically makes a sort of composition, a sub-composition. As we know, a composition is kind of just like the general animation, right? We can make a pre-composition, which is basically a folder together of multiple layers inside. So then we can just basically do what we want to do with it, whether it's the position, the rotation, whatever it might be, to this pre-composition as one, and we can still edit what's inside. So I'm just going to put text as the name, and we're going to press move all attributes into the new composition, which means all of these things are going to move inside of the pre-composition. I'm going to press OK. Now, as you can see, we just have one layer, which is the everything, okay, right here, okay. So what I'm going to do now, I can basically affect is the scale. So now I can make this bigger and everything stays the same because it's the exact same things that were inside, right? We can actually still go into by double clicking the text, this sort of pre-composition layer, and we can go in and change anything we want to do. So literally, if I wanted to make this ridiculously bright, okay, and then go back into this animation layer, it's changed. It automatically changes. We have the full, choice of what we want to do. We can add more layers. We can do whatever we want to do to it inside whilst it, live changes essentially. So what we're going to do is we're going to create two keyframes, one at the scale of 100%, and then in 5 seconds, we're going to have it at 110. Okay, and I'm going to bring this working area right down. And what you can see now is we have this beautiful pattern movement whilst the scale is changing. And this is just ridiculously clean as itself. So now that we have these two animations done, I just want you to take a moment right now to just make sure you understand everything. If there's anything that hasn't been made clear, just make sure to go back and just kind of, try to understand more, because although project-based learning is incredibly difficult to get at first, because it's very fast-paced and, you kind of just thrown into the deep end, it's the quickest way to learn. And especially I found with creative, endeavors, whether it's learning how to edit and for motion design and things like that, the fastest way for you to learn is to just basically throw yourself into the deep end. So now we're going to be moving on to something more advanced with the third animation, and let's just get straight into it. So let's just create the third animation composition, of course, just like we did for the others. And in this one, this is the animation that we're going to be creating. I'm going to put it on screen right now. As you can see, we have a few different colors going on. We have obviously a shape going on and also some effects where it just basically stylizes the animation we have going on. So how we're going to create this. So first of all, what we're going to do is create a background, and how we're going to do this is we're basically going to create a solid background. So how do we do this? Because as you can see, this is black currently in the composition, and basically this isn't a solid color, because if we actually toggle the transparency, you'll be able to see that it's just transparent. We just have a background color of the composition, okay? So how do we create a solid? So what we can do is we can right click here and press new, and then go to solid, and we can set this as anything we want. I'm going to change the name to background. As you can see, it's the same size as the composition, which is what we want it to be, and a color. Now, the color doesn't matter too much right now because we're going to add an effect to have this nice gradient background, so we're just going to press OK. As you can see, this is already here as a layer, as a basically solid layer. What we're going to do is we're going to head over to the effects and presets, and we're going to find a effect called gradient ramp and drag this onto the layer. As you can see, now we have basically a gradient of two colors. As you can see, there is black and there is white. What we're going to do is basically create it red, okay? However, as you can see that this is, we basically want it to be red at the top and black at the bottom. So we're going to get this black current color right now, and change this on the colors to red. We're going to go for this red, I believe, and then this white one to black. And as you can see now, we have a nice gradient. So what you'll be able to see is that we have the control over the start of the ramp and the end of the ramp. And if we bring this down, you can see exactly where the start is right here. I'm going to put it to select it maybe here. And then of course, you could do the same for the bottom of the ramp, which is right here. But this is good. This is our nice background, and this is all we need for the background. So as you can see in the animation, we have a square that's moving, it's rotating. If we go over to this shape layer, this shape selector, hold down, and we're going to go to rectangle. What we're going to do is we're going to do the shift trick. So basically, instead of it being a free sort of shape, we're going to hold shift, and that makes it kind of like a solid shape. We're going to probably make it around this big. We're going to go down to align it in the centers, and we're going to change the anchor point to being in the middle. There we go. So that is everything. Now we can also go into the proportional grid and also see that everything is centered. And as you can see, these little tricks that I've been telling you over the last animations, they come in handy, just to make sure things are nicely smooth. So we have a shape in the middle. And now we can see that, also this layer has a gradient and the final animation. However, we're going to focus that on that in a minute. First of all, let's get the rotation. So as we know, we need to set a, 2 keyframes on the timeline. So what we can do, instead of pressing P for position for this shape, is we can press R. R allows us to change the rotation. There's also other ones. For example, if you press S, we'll change the scale. So we can actually go in and change the scale right here. I'm going to press back. If we press R, then we'll be able to change the rotation. So as you can see now, this shape rotates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a keyframe number 1. And because this is going to be our final sort of position, right? Final position, I'm going to put this as actually the later part of the animation. I'm going to put it at the 5-second mark. And you'll be able to, as I said, you'll be able to see exactly if you're on the keyframe by this part coming blue. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in and get to the point where we're on the keyframe. Once you're going to zoom in a little bit more. As you can see now, we're on the keyframe, okay? So that is that value. Now at the start, I'm going to change the value to being minus, let's say minus 300-ish. We can actually just type it. And as you can see right now, because it's just standalone, it's just basically from one value to the other, and that's what it's going to look like. However, in the animation, we can see that it's actually smooth. It's a smooth animation. It's actually got this kind of like characteristic around it. And this is introducing a technique called easing. Okay, easy ease. And this is one of my favorite things in animation and motion design. And basically how we can do this is if we select both keyframes on the time frame. Okay, on the timeline, sorry. We select both keyframes. We're going to right click, and then we're going to go down to Keyframe Assistant and Easy Ease. Okay, or you can press F9. However, this is just, I'm just showing you how to do it. Okay, and what this does automatically, if we play the clip now, as you can see now, it's a lot more smooth because at the very start and at the very end, it slows down. Okay, so it's slow at the very start, and then it becomes quicker, and then near the end it slows down again, and that is just ridiculously smooth, right? But what we can do is we can play around with this ourselves. We can actually have a manual kind of control over how quick parts of the between the keyframes are and how fast they are. But if we just click one of the keyframes, we can select both of them, but also we can just simply select one of them, and we can head over to this thing right here, which is the graph editor. If this is getting confusing, just take it step by step. If there's anything that you don't understand, you can also research into it more and more. So for example, this graph editor, you can also type into YouTube and type in graph editor, and you would have a full tutorial on how to use a graph editor. But in this tutorial, I just want to give you a well-rounded sort of beginning intro to After Effects. Now, as you can see, this matches, this is actually on a speed graph, as you can see right here. Once again, you can look into more tutorials on YouTube in regards to the graph editor, but for now we're just going to be going over this. As you can see, this matches how it is in terms of speed. So as you can see, starts slow and then gets fast, and then as it comes to the second keyframe, it gets slow again. if we dragged this last one, okay, right back, as you have to see, it reflects the exact same sort of shape that we have right here. So it goes fast, and then it goes really slow near the end, okay? And that's exactly what we want, okay? That's exactly what the animation looks like. We can play around with this even more by even dragging this one forward, which means that it'll be a very slow start, fast, and then back to slow again. And that's what we're going to leave it as. Now all we need to do is add a gradient similar to the background onto the shape. However, we need it to be the complete opposite. So what we're going to do is basically copy the gradient that we had on this sort of solid background, and we're going to paste it onto the shape layer. Okay, as you can see, because it is the exact same gradient, there is now nothing visible because it would be the exact same gradient as the background, right? Like it has the very same starting points. However, if I pull down this right here, which is the starting point, and brought up the end of the ramp, be able to see that now you can slightly just see it because we've just changed the the start points of the ramp and the end point of the ramp. But what we're going to do is we're going to flip it. Okay, I'm going to press swap colors. Okay, just this button, which means it's just flipped on its head essentially now. And as you can see, now we have this opposite of the background, right? I'm going to zoom out and just change the working area. So we just have this area on show. Great, that looks really nice. We're going to make the reds slightly more bright, so I'm going to put it around here. And the next one, the same exact red, but just the opposite. As you can see, this looks really, really clean. You know, this looks cool, but it looks nothing like the square in the final animation. So how can we add this cool little effect to it, this shine effect? If we go over to the Effects and Presets panel, and we type in CC Light Sweep, and then drag this onto the layer, be able to see now we have this nice little kind of like light that's shining down on the object. Okay, so this is just a cool little effect that we can add on. However, what we can do is we want the light to just go directly down, right? We want it to go directly down from the top, okay, to kind of match this gradient we have of the background. So what we can do is change the direction of it to just 0 for just 0 degrees. Okay, so now we can see that the light is shining from the top to the bottom. Okay, we want to make this light wide, so we up the width right here. So as you can see, we have this nice kind of width, but we want to make it red, so we can change the light color to a red, okay, a really bright red. And now, as you'll be able to see, we have this really cool effect. I feel like this light is too sharp though, going down the middle, so we'll change the shape of it to linear, and that has a much more sort of like, you know, less focused sort of just, you know, shine down the middle. So I'm just altering this width to around, I think, 100. Let's make it 100. We'll make the sweep intensity 20, so it's not as intense in the middle, but more so on the edges of it. And as you can see now, we have this really cool effect, and now you've made your third animation, and this looks really, really cool. Okay, so this is really cool. Like the shape looks really nice and stylistic, you know, the actual square, this square in the middle. However, the background just feels a little bit too plain. You know, there's nothing really happening in the background. What we can do is we can head over to the second animation panel, okay, and what we could do is probably just take in this background that we have, you know, this background right here, and that's behind the text, and maybe add it into the background of this, you know. So what we can do is we can head over to Project, and we can find this video, so the sort of this pattern thing, and in between the background and the shape. So obviously the color just doesn't match because, you know, we have this really like vibrant blue and we want it to be the same as the gradient background, right? So how do we do this? Well, this is where we can use modes. Okay, you can see this section that says mode, right? And we can change it by a drop down menu right here. Now, just one thing to quickly say, if you cannot see all of these, you know, options right here, you can go to click toggle switches / modes, you know, just in case you can't see it. And basically this will allow you to see it right here. But if you go to the modes, we can then choose something. So for example, how this overlays onto the layer before it. So the background layer, okay? If we went on modes, for the shape layer, it would basically be affecting how it, you know, overlays the layers before it. Okay, so specifically the layer before it. So we're going to do this for the background. If we just went on basically just like screen, for example, you'll be able to see that now, like it screens the red from the background, so it looks like this. However, this isn't perfect yet. Okay, it doesn't have the look that we're looking for. So if we go over to, for example, saturation, now we're getting into some cool territory. You know, this looks really, really nice, and I think this is really effective. Let me just test around to see what others might look. Okay, luminosity looks really, really cool. Okay, nice. Now, let's stylize it a little bit, because this is too sharp, because we want still the center sort of like object to be this one. We don't want people to be looking at this background. So let's add some blur. What we can do is add Gaussian blur, drag this onto this abstract layer, and then up the blurriness. And now, as you can see, now this is quite blurry, okay? So we haven't got all the finer details. I still feel like it's a little bit too in our face, so I'm going to go into the effects and presets and add brightness and contrast and bring this into the layer. It's going to bring the brightness a little bit down to maybe -50 or so. And this looks really cool. This looks really cool. Okay, nice. So this is a really cool animation, and I feel like it takes us up to a new level, considering just a few minutes ago we were reducing this level of animation is crazy. You know, we're just starting with such a basic thing of just kind of understanding the physics of moving objects, and then moving on to, you know, this text animation, which then shows, you know, this nice kind of effect in the background, to now being able to produce this, which is like next level compared to, you know, what we were just at. Now, I want to create a fourth animation real quick, just to have a, you know, a new kind of understanding of After Effects and a new kind of style. So let's go ahead and create in a new composition and the final one. And then after this, I'm going to show you how to export animations, okay? So let's just create this fourth one. And what I want to do, of course, because this background is automatically black in the composition, and what we can do is we can either go into, you know, the composition settings and just change it ourselves. However, I just want to, out of good practice, make a solid, okay, and we're going to create a white background. I'm just going to rename this to white background, and there we have it. Okay, what I want to do is basically create an animation that kind of says, "Hi, I'm Tom." It's kind of just an introduction, kind of like Apple effect, like animation, so like the Apple text kind of animation. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a new text layer, and I'm going to make it say, "Hi, I'm Tom." It's gone off the screen. I'm going to select this all, and I'm going to make the size of it smaller. Okay, I'm going to make it probably around this size. I'm going to change the color of it to black, and I'm going to center it, and I'm going to change the anchor point to being in the middle. Okay, so now we have some basic text in the middle. I'm going to change the type of font this is. I'm going to keep it the same font. However, I'm going to make it probably a you know what? I'm gonna make it semi-bold. That looks good. Okay, I'm actually going to change this to be in lowercase. And yeah, I think this looks good. Cool. Okay, so I want to animate this, and I want to animate them basically all individually. So the hi and the I'm and the Tom, I want to animate them separately. However, I find the quickest way, instead of creating just, you know, 3 new text layers and just being like, okay, I'm going to make one hi and then make another one I'm, you know, and going into this process and then trying to align them up and all of this, you know, issue. There's a quicker way to animate. So I want to make them go basically from down the screen to come up and have this kind of like smooth, you know, transition to up, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the layer. I'm going to press a P for position. I'm going to select the 5-second mark, and the position to kind of like this being the final, place that the animation is going to be. And I'm going to make it so, the starting point of the animation is around here, let's say. And we're going to select the keyframes, and we're going to go to Keyframe Assistant and Easy Ease, okay? So right now we have this, okay? I'm going to go into I'm going to open the graph editor just to change this, okay? Because I want it to be a bit of a more sudden start, but then a gradual ending. So we'll go like this. Okay, going to be a bit more sudden at the very start. And this is what we have right here, okay? What I can do now is basically introduce a thing called masks. Now masks are basically a way to select a certain area of a layer and basically make that thing the only thing visible, okay? Mask is basically to create a shape on a layer that only shows that part visible, if that makes sense. I'm going to show you what I mean right now, okay? So with this layer, if we basically grab this rectangle tool, we can create a mask ourselves. What we can do is, just by having this layer selected, is we just drag over a certain section of the layer, and now this is a mask. A mask is basically just showing this portion of the layer, okay? So now we've just masked the high, okay? And I'm going to go back right now. I'm just going to duplicate this 3 times, this layer, okay? 3. So we have the high, I'm, and Tom. What I can do is basically just select the first layer and select with our rectangle tool high, and this will mask this layer itself, okay? And a way we can check this is by making the other 2 layers not visible. So I'm going to actually select this, which basically makes a layer not visible. And as you can see, now on this first layer is just high selected as a mask. If we now make the second layer visible and then use the rectangle tool to make it a mask, and we're going to just select I'm, as you can see now, this is the only thing that's visible on this layer. If we bring in the third layer, I'm going to basically mask out this one. And now for each of the layers, basically, they have just one word selected, okay? And as you'll be able to see, when we play this back, it's still the same animation, you know? However, if we now pull this one back and this one back on the timeline, you'll be able to see now there's different starting points and they're kind of staggered in their animation, okay? And this is a really cool effect. What I'm going to do is now select all of the layers. I'm going to make them a pre-composition, so pre-compose them as we've talked about before. We're going to put text, animation as the name. We can use mask once again. And by this entire pre-composition, I can select the rectangle tool and I can mask this layer. And what this does, it just makes this portion of it visible. So if now I play it from, the point where this animation starts, you'll be able to see now we have this really cool animation. And I'm going to go back and make this kind of the only working area. I'm going to just do it between these points right here. As you can see, we have this really cool animation. And what I can also do with masks is introduce a feather. A feather basically means that the lines of the mask are not as harsh. So if I up the feather right here, as you can see now it becomes more soft of a line. So what they'll now be really cool with is, now with the animation, it's nice and soft for that mask. So we have a really cool effect, of an animation here. We have this animation which looks amazing, it's amazing text animation. We have this one which looks really, really cool. As you can see, we have this one which is a nice text animation too with the background. And of course we had that first one which we just started at, and your progression has been incredible in this last, you know how long we've been recording. And now there's a lot more functionality of After Effects that we haven't gone through, of course. If we go up to this bar at the top where we've obviously selected shapes and text, there are other ones. So if we actually use this hand tool, what we can do is we can just move this canvas so we can have a better look on things. For example, if we zoom in with our our mouse, essentially, we can still just move this around so we have a good, viewing of the animation that we're creating. Okay, and we can go back to fit right here so we can see everything nicely. We also have the zoom tool. Okay, so if we just have the zoom tool, we can go and click and zoom, and then if we hold option, we can basically zoom out and click. Okay, that's how that works. I'm going to press fit again. The other thing that really I think would be beneficial to you is the pen tool, because this allows you to kind of draw lines. Okay, so I can draw, I'm going to change the stroke, which will basically mean a stroke is a line. I'm going to change it to black color. But we've just selected this point, and with the pen, we can select a set and then pull. And as you can see, we can create these nice little curves, and you can create another point and make, kind of like a nice drawing. For example, you can see this color here that's filling it. We can just click this fill and then no fill. And as you can see, we have this line right here. Obviously, you can be stylistic with it. You can change the thickness of the stroke itself right here with this sort of drag thing here. I'm going to delete this. Of course, we have the text tool. And the things other than that, I really don't think you need at this point, because you're just starting your journey. You're just getting a basic understanding, and you need to just kind of start playing around with After Effects itself and just, using the things that you've learned today and how to use the software generally. Just play around, create your own text, create your own shapes, create your own scenes, and just have a play around with it. Now, the last thing to just go through is to, how to export projects at this point, because we've created these cool animations. How do we export them? What we can do is go to File, go to Export, and we can go to all of these options. A lot of people use Render Queue. Of course, you can add it to a Premiere Pro project, so actually directly into a Premiere Pro project, Cinema 4D Exporter, when you're doing some advanced sort of 3D animations, which of course is just like, that's a bit down the line from now. What I'd recommend is doing Adobe Media Encoder Q. I'm going to show you why, because it's very similar to if you're exporting in Premiere Pro. So if you have any experience in Premiere Pro, this will be a bit more familiar for you. So now that this is loaded up, you'll be able to just see this first animation. So ignore all of these ones here, because these are just past things that I've worked on. However, you'll be able to see your animation and it'll say ready. Okay. What you can do is basically go into here and change the output file. So you click on it and you'll change exactly what is the output. So where does it go on your computer? So for example, you can just set it to desktop or a folder that you created. And then you can go into this section. You can click this. And as soon as you open this up, it's very similar to, what it's like in Premiere Pro when you're exporting things in Premiere Pro, of course. And what you can do is to scroll down these settings. The one thing I would just change, because all of your settings should be pretty good to start with, is the VBR. You can just whack this up to whatever you want it to be. If it's 4K, I'll do a lot more. I'm just going to do 15 for now, as around 1080p. And then all you can do is press OK. And then press this play button right here. I'll start the queue and basically start rendering your animation. So as you can see, it's already been done. It was that quick, and that'll be it. And you already have the exported video. So hopefully this has given you a good enough insight on how to kind of start your After Effects journey, and just, how to use After Effects to make some really cool, simple animations. So this module would have given you just a basic understanding of how to create your first animations in After Effects and just have a basic understanding of the software. We have tens and tens of modules to go through in terms of After Effects from now in the rest of the program, and we have obviously video editing sections of Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve and Blender, and all of these different things to come up from now, and obviously building your business. So basically get prepared for the later modules. I hope this has been a useful one for you, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. 6-Figure Editor is built for your success. With all of the templates and resources that you need, your new family by your side in the community, us on weekly Q&A calls for guidance, and of course, the world-class program itself. So take advantage of this opportunity, and I look forward to welcoming you inside.